Yes, my name's Adrian Hazzard from the Mixed Reality Lab at the University of Nottingham, and I'm going to talk a little about designing the audience journey through repeated experiences. The performance of live music often uses some form of visual enhancement. For example, the giant screens at pop concerts that show complex graphics, or a close-up view of the performers' interactions with their instruments that might not be visible from the audience's vantage point. Increasingly, concert visuals are spilling out onto mobile devices. For example, those interactive program apps at classical music concerts that give background information on the work prior to the performance, but also those that unfold during real time as the performance unfolds. Musical performances that use a great deal of digital technologies, say, for example, electronic music or DJs or electroacoustic music performances, arguably they may need further enhancement or understanding due to the complexity of their forms. The system interactions, the making of the music, is often completely hidden from the audience's view. And we're interested in this subject matter. So we report on the iterative design of a suite of visual interfaces to support audience understanding and appreciation of a new musical work called Clym. And we developed some on-stage projections, a real-time audience application, and out of the concert hall, an online archive. And we were particularly interested in trying to find a balance between leaving the audience to appreciate the work in their own terms, while supporting interpretation as they may want it, but also to accommodate diverse patterns of repeat listening, from experiencing a musical work once to experiencing it many times over the lifetime of it. So we collaborated with Kallionpää. She's a composer and a concert pianist, and the research team worked with her over a 9-month period from the initial conceptions to her composition, to our design of the performance system, to the point that it is now, which is a touring work. And we report on the lessons we learned from this, and we captured some audience evaluation along the way. Stylistically, Clym is an electroacoustic composition, and it's scored for a single performer, a pianist, a disclavier piano, and electronics. Now, a disclavier piano is the same as a standard acoustic concert instrument, but embedded into it is a mechanism which enables it to self-play its keys as driven by a MIDI input. MIDI communication protocol dictates what notes play for what duration and at what dynamic level. So in Clym, Maria uses the self-playing disclavier to duet with on the same instrument. Clym uses the metaphor of a challenging climb up a mountain. There are 26 separate scored sections of work, and each performance starts at base camp and concludes at the summit, but the route that a performer may take between those two outer sections is not fixed. There's a narrative which sits embedded within the work, so these sections represent certain events or challenges or experience encountered en route, such as meeting an angry deer, or needing to navigate a flooded path, or work your way through a mysterious forest and avoid falling rocks. There's changing weather conditions en route, and these weather conditions are realized via audio effects that process the acoustic piano sound and are broadcast as a separate layer on top. Significantly, there are challenges in certain sections faced en route, and these challenges are musical. Embedded into the scored work are a number of challenging musical phrases to play. And if a performer plays them correctly, they continue on their current path. If they don't play them correctly, then they're pushed off their path and they branch off onto another one. So therefore, Clym is non-linear, it's indeterminate, it's interactive, and there's a game-like element embedded into the musical work. And therefore, we think it's particularly suitable for repeated listening. And here's an expert of Maria. system we developed to enable this interactive performance has been charted in a number of other papers, so I'm not going to go into detail with it. But the lightest guide to what's happening goes as this. The software system effectively listens to what the pianist is playing on the disclavier, and it's listening out for a number of predefined musical phrases that are embedded within the scored material. And these phrases, when matched by the system, then trigger a number of interactions, such as determining the route that the pianist takes up the mountain, these challenges that I mentioned earlier. It cues up and displays the appropriate section of score on a digital score display for the performer. It triggers the self-playing disclavier parts that duet with the pianist at the appropriate times. It controls the weather effects. It triggers the on-stage projections, and it sends updates to the audience app. So Clym is a pretty complex performance piece. It's non-linear, it's indeterminate, and there are many hidden system interactions. And our overriding question was, how best do we support audience understanding and appreciation of this? And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we addressed this through a number of visual interfaces. So first off, we developed a set of on-stage projections, and these projections were there to enhance the aesthetics of the performance, as well as to reveal some of the mechanisms at play. And one of these was about highlighting the changing musical arrangement, the sections that the pianist works through. And to this end, each section is accompanied with a different background animation. We then turned our attention to the interaction between the disclavier and the pianist. A blue flash appears every time a disclavier part is triggered, and the mountain outline animates in synchronization with the disclavier part, not the pianist's part, so it makes a distinction between the pianist and the disclavier. The weather conditions are visualized, and when challenge codes are approached and completed successfully, a red flash is shown on the mountain. So there's 4 layers of visual information there that each represent a different facet of the work and the interactions at play. But we wanted to leave interpretation of these open, so there were no overt explanations as to about what these visualizations represented. We also designed an audience application, and this was a web app that was designed to run on the audience's own handsets. And this presented 2 sets of information, some pre-performance information, such as a program note, the performer's biog, and an overview of the composition, both textually and also a visual representation within the frame of the mountain, the same design that's seen on stage in the abstract visualizations. But there's also in-performance materials by way of a dynamic map that shows real-time progress of the pianist's journey up the mountain, about where they are, which section, and which branching sections are available to them at any given time. There's also a narrative description of the unfolding story, and also, should the audience members wish, they can compare the current journey up the mountain in the performance to previous performances, maybe by previous pianists, to get a comparison of the non-linear work and how the different structures of a performance unfold. We thought long and hard about the staging the audience interpretation. It's not really clear how easy it should be to interpret a work of art, in our case a musical work, and what information should you give to an audience to scaffold their interpretation. But turning our attention to HCI, we embrace Senger's and Gaver's view that designs can clearly specify usability whilst leaving interpretation of use open. And to that end, we also adopted Reeves et al.'s term the expressive strategy, in that we revealed both the performer's manipulations of the system and the subsequent effect of those manipulations to the audience. And this involved us carefully thinking about a number of things. First was how we set the stage. We broke tradition by orienting the piano so that the audience could see the keyboard better, to see the interaction between the pianist and the self-playing disclavier. And we also lit the keyboard as well to further expose that interaction. We thought about what type of visual information was displayed on the public on-stage screen that promotes audience convergence, and that these images should be impressionistic, and they should augment what's happening on stage. And that's set against the visual imagery that's sent to the mobile phone that's tailorable, that's supporting information, that offers opportunities for audience divergence from what's happening on stage. So at the premiere performance of Clym, we took the opportunity to get some audience evaluation. We decided, rather unusually, to perform Clym twice back-to-back in the same concert. And this is so we could capture a rich picture of the audience's developing understanding of the work through repeated performances, to expose its non-linearity. We asked the audience to complete a questionnaire after the first performance, and then perform the work again and ask them to fill out another questionnaire about their understanding of the work. In the paper, we go into detail about the findings, presenting the findings, and I'm just going to give the quickest skim here. Is they were quite interested in being able to have the opportunity to compare performances, and we found that they reoriented their focus to different facets of the work and the performance from across the two performances. Partly due to their increased understanding and interpretation of the work as it developed. As predicted, the interaction between the pianist and the disclavier was of key interest, and they wanted more of that than we gave them. So in subsequent performances of Clym, we've integrated in a bird's eye view of the disclavier keyboard and blended that into the onstage projections to further reveal that interaction. They reported that the mobile app made visible what was happening, but not why things were happening. And we've tried to address that in part by updating the app so that it gives notifications to the audience members to anticipate when challenges are approaching and interactions are coming up, so they can focus, so we're converging the audience to look out for certain things before they happen. But is this enough? Is this enough to support interpretation of a work in one concert hall performance? So we embraced Raisins' view that actually the experience of a performance lives on beyond the end of that performance through memories and afterlives and reflections. But we extend on that, and we think that actually the experience of a performance lives through multiple engagements of the same work, whether that's attending multiple concerts or listening to recordings, so that the lifetime of the work is about multiple engagements and developing interpretations and understanding and appreciation of the same work. So to that end, we've performed Clym, I think, 4 times now, and on each performance we perform it twice, as we did in the premiere, to expose its non-linearity and its indeterminacy. But we've also developed, outside of the concert hall, a prototype online archive. So this archive is populated with historic performances of Clym, where users can choose a specific performance, watch audio and video from that performance, they can compare performances and interactively work through the map, the routes, choose sections, compare sections, and get information on these musical codes that they faced within a performance. And we talk a bit more in depth about our evaluation of that in the paper as well. So in the paper, we discuss our findings and the lessons we learned through our iterative design process. And we frame the discussion and a set of design recommendations using the trajectories conceptual framework by Benford et al. And the trajectories framework considers the audience experience from 3 perspectives. First, the canonical trajectory, the scripted, the intended journey through the experience. Then the participant trajectory, which is accounting for the proposition that audiences or people will not do what you intend them to do, that they will diverge at some point and they will reconverge at other points. And that needs to be accounted for in how you design experiences. And then finally, the historic trajectory, how you recount your experience through that. If you're interested in finding out a bit more about this work, please come and talk to me about it afterwards, but probably better still, download the paper, read the paper. We go into this in much more detail. So I'll bring it to a conclusion here and invite questions. And if you're interested in exploring the app, it can be found at the URL there. Thank you.
Questions? I have a question. I actually found the recommendations for how to design such audiovisual recommendations really helpful. I also think some of the audience comments that you have in your paper are quite helpful in terms of how such things can be designed in the future. I wanted to ask you the balancing act conceptually about augmentation versus interpretation of such a musical act, for example.
Yes, that's an interesting one, and it's a tricky one. And I suppose it's something which runs through the experience of any work of art, and any artist, when they're preparing a work of art, needs to consider. And art is provocative. Some people will like what they see or what they hear, and other people won't like what they see and what they hear. And we found with our audience evaluation that some people, for example, found the onstage visuals effective in terms of enhancing the performance. Other people thought they were distracting, that they were a little bit too crude and didn't really see the point. This was high art, it was a contemporary classical piece. Why did we need these visuals here? So I guess my rambling answer is saying that it's difficult, and I'm not sure there's a definitive answer to saying how you balance those, other than you need to make some choices at some point and run with them. I suppose to add on to that, our visuals also were kind of taking on that functional role of trying to reveal hidden system interactions. So we would argue that that maybe the balancing act is about us revealing to the audience how to interpret how that visual information is making the system visible. And that was something which I didn't mention in the premiere performance. For the first performance, we didn't give the audience much detail about the form of the work or the mechanisms at play. And then in between performances, we gave a talk to them and spoke in detail about how the work was structured and how the system worked, to sort of deliberately give them more information for the second performance. And that certainly aided them to understand how our visual interfaces were working and complementing the work.
Thank you. Thank you for presenting the work and for such an extensive work. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I would like to invite the next speaker on stage.